It was March 9, 1945. As the sun dipped low over the Mariana Islands, a different kind of storm was gathering, one forged not by nature, but by the relentless machinery of war. 325 B-29 superfortresses stood ready, their bellies packed not just with bombs, but with a terrifying new weapon designed for one single devastating purpose. What happened next wasn't just another bombing run. It was a night that would sear itself into history, unleashing a firestorm that Tokyo and the world would never forget. But why did America resort to such brutal tactics? And could anything have truly prepared Japan for the inferno to come? The airfields on Guam, Saipan, and Tinian hummed with activity. These islands, hard won from Japanese control, were now launch pads aimed straight at the heart of the enemy empire. Ground crews swarmed around the massive silver bombers, the B-29 Superfortress. This was the pinnacle of American air power, a machine that cost more to develop than the atomic bomb itself. Each plane was a testament to American industrial might. Nearly 100 feet long with a wingspan stretching 141 feet, powered by 4 monstrous Wright engines. These weren't just planes. They were symbols of a nation fully mobilized for total war. But this mission, ordered by Major General Curtis LeMay, was different. It represented a gamble, a radical departure from the high-altitude precision bombing that had until then yielded frustratingly little success against Japan. The jet stream, those powerful winds high above the earth, had scattered bombs wildly, and persistent cloud cover often hid the targets completely. LeMay, a man known for his blunt assessment of reality, knew something had to change. His solution was audacious, brutal, and strategically calculated. Forget precision from 30,000 feet. Tonight they would go in low, between 5,000 and 7,000 feet, well below the unpredictable jet stream and under the effective ceiling of much of Japan's heavy anti-aircraft fire. To make this possible and to carry the maximum destructive load, LeMay ordered the B-29s stripped of most of their defensive machine guns and ammunition. Lighter planes meant more fuel efficiency and, crucially, more room for the payload. This meant nearly double the usual amount, but not of high explosives. Tonight, the weapon of choice was fire itself. Packed into the bomb bays were thousands upon thousands of M69 incendiary bomblets. Each bomber carried clusters designed to break apart midair, scattering 1,120 individual 6-pound steel tubes. Inside each tube was napalm, a jellied gasoline mixture engineered to burn ferociously at 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, sticking to whatever it touched and resisting water. A delayed fuse ensured they'd ignite after crashing through flimsy roofs, spreading their deadly contents horizontally inside homes and workshops. This wasn't just about destroying buildings, it was about igniting an entire city. The target was Tokyo's Shitamachi district, a densely packed 12-square-mile area of wooden homes and small cottage industries, home to 750,000 people. American intelligence knew these weren't just residences. Interwoven within were countless small workshops producing vital parts for Japan's war machine, aircraft components, electronics, and precision tools. Destroying this network was key to crippling Japan's ability to fight. Planners, using pre-war Japanese maps and data, had calculated that the density of wooden structures combined with the predicted strong winds that night could create something truly terrifying, a firestorm, a self-sustaining inferno that would generate its own hurricane-force winds and consume everything in its path. It was a chillingly scientific approach to urban destruction. As the first B-29s roared down the runways and climbed into the darkening Pacific sky, they flew not in tight formations but individually, navigating by radio signals toward a single point on the map. Leading the way were the pathfinders, tasked with marking the target zone with a massive burning X visible for miles. The main force would follow, turning the designated area into a sea of flames. For the crews, many of whom had questioned LeMay's risky low-altitude tactics, the mood was tense. They knew the potential danger, but they also knew the strategic importance. They were placing their trust in LeMay's cold logic and the sheer power of their machines. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, life carried on under the shadow of war, but with a degree of complacency. Previous high-altitude B-29 raids had been frightening, certainly, but the damage had often been scattered, the sirens more disruptive than truly deadly for most. Air raid drills were practiced, yes, but the city's defenses were tragically inadequate for the scale of the attack brewing miles away over the ocean. Fewer than 500 heavy anti-aircraft guns protected the sprawling metropolis, many lacking effective radar for night targeting. Japan's night fighter force was small, hampered by fuel shortages, pilot inexperience, and the absence of airborne radar crucial for intercepting bombers in the dark. Pilots often relied on searchlights, simply pointing them in the right direction. This was a near impossible task against fast-moving B-29s. The contrast couldn't be starker. Hundreds of the world's most advanced bombers against a defense network struggling with limited resources and outdated technology. Around 10:30 p.m., the sirens wailed across Tokyo. Many residents, accustomed to the alerts, likely stayed put initially. Simple backyard shelters or shallow trenches offered scant protection against fire. The city's firefighting force, numbering around 8,000, was equipped primarily with hand pumps and bucket brigades. These were tools suited for peacetime fires, not an aerial onslaught designed to create a firestorm. Neighborhood firefighting groups, composed mostly of the elderly, women, and teenagers, stood ready with sand and water, unaware of the futility of their efforts against napalm. The firestorm begins. Shortly before midnight on March 10th, the Pathfinders arrived. Flying at 25,000 feet, they circled the city and dropped their M47 napalm bombs, creating a giant fiery X that bloomed against the darkened city below to guide the main force. It was the signal. Minutes later, the main wave began its relentless assault. From 5,000 feet, the sky began to rain fire. Clusters broke open, showering the wooden rooftops with thousands of M69 bomblets. Observers on the ground described the terrifying sight of metallic objects glinting in the growing firelight before impact. Then came the ignition. Delayed fuses triggered, and thousands of points of fire erupted almost simultaneously across the densely packed neighborhoods. Driven by the strong ground winds LeMay's meteorologist had predicted, small fires merged into larger ones, then into roaring walls of flame that leaped from house to house, street to street. The carefully planned firestorm was born. Temperatures soared to unimaginable levels. They were hot enough to melt glass, ignite asphalt roads, and cause buildings to collapse from sheer heat before the flames even touched them. The air itself became a weapon. Superheated gases rose violently, creating powerful updrafts and fiery whirlwinds that sucked debris, and tragically people, into the air. Visibility dropped to near zero in the thick, acrid smoke. The roar of the inferno drowned out screams and the sound of collapsing structures. Escape routes vanished in moments. Narrow alleys became death traps, clogged with panicked crowds and blocked by fire. Imagine being there. Imagine the sheer terror. Yoshiko Hashimoto, a young woman home with her baby while her husband was away on duty, later described the bomblets sounding like heavy rain. When she fled with her family, the streets were chaos. Burning debris rained down. The wind whipped fire everywhere. Signboards, doors, entire sections of houses flew through the air. Reaching the Sumida River offered no real sanctuary. Warehouses lining the banks were ablaze. Her father's desperate act of pushing her and her baby into the water saved them, but he, her mother, and her sister were lost in the inferno. Such heartbreaking stories were repeated thousands of times over that night. People seeking refuge in canals found the water itself dangerously hot or were crushed in the desperate surge to escape the heat. Designated evacuation centers like schools and temples became surrounded by fire, turning places of supposed safety into tombs. The Kikukawa Elementary School, later examined, revealed only melted metal and charred remains where hundreds had sought shelter. Even underground shelters offered little protection from the suffocating smoke and radiant heat that baked the ground above. The very air became unbreathable. For nearly 3 hours, the B-29s came, wave after wave, raining down over 600 tons of incendiaries, roughly 424,000 individual bomblets onto the doomed city. The crews flying through the later waves reported the smell of burning flesh even miles high in their pressurized cabins. Turbulence from the massive thermal updrafts tossed the giant bombers around like toys. The glow from the firestorm was visible over 150 miles away. For those on the ground, it was an eternity in hell. The devastation. As dawn broke on March 10th, the scale of the devastation was revealed. Where the bustling Shitamachi district had stood, there was now a smoldering wasteland stretching nearly 16 square miles. A quarter of Tokyo's buildings, over 267,000 structures, were gone, reduced to ash and rubble. Only the most robust concrete or brick buildings remained standing, stark silhouettes against the smoke-filled sky. The human cost was staggering, exceeding the initial death toll of either atomic bomb dropped later that year. While precise numbers are debated, the consensus holds that over 100,000 people died in that single night, with tens of thousands more injured. Over 1 million people were left homeless, wandering the ruins, searching for loved ones, their lives shattered in a matter of hours. The American losses were minimal. Just 14 bombers failed to return, a small fraction of the attacking force carrying 96 airmen lost. Some fell victim to the firestorm's turbulence, others to sporadic anti-aircraft fire or the few desperate attacks by Japanese night fighters. For the American command, Operation Meeting House was deemed a terrifying success. General Arnold cabled LeMay, praising his crew's guts for anything. The strategy had worked, perhaps too well. The impact was immediate and profound, not just on Tokyo but on the course of the war. LeMay didn't waste time. Within 10 days, similar low-level incendiary raids hammered Nagoya, Osaka, and Kobe, Japan's next largest cities. The campaign only paused temporarily because the bombers had literally run out of incendiary bombs. American factories ramped up production immediately. The message was clear: no Japanese city was safe. Strategic impact. The firebombing campaign, often overshadowed in Western memory by the atomic bombs, fundamentally changed the nature of the air war in the Pacific. It demonstrated America's overwhelming industrial capacity, the ability to design, build, and deploy such advanced weaponry on a massive scale, replacing losses almost immediately. Japan simply couldn't compete. Its industry, already strained, was now being systematically dismantled, not just in large factories, but in the thousands of small neighborhood workshops obliterated by the fire raids. The loss of skilled workers, either killed or displaced, was a blow from which production never recovered. Think about the sheer disparity. The B-29 program alone cost about $3 billion, roughly equivalent to Japan's annual military expenditures in the final years of the war. While America churned out tens of thousands of tons of incendiary bombs monthly, Japan struggled for basic ammunition and fuel. This wasn't just a difference in quantity. It was a chasm in technological and industrial power. America's approach was methodical, almost scientific, testing bomb effectiveness on replica Japanese villages built in the Utah desert, refining napalm formulas in university labs, using advanced meteorology to pick the perfect night for maximum destruction. Japan's defenses, hampered by inter-service rivalry, poor communication, lack of radar, and dwindling resources, relied more on outdated methods and sheer determination. This was tragically insufficient against the onslaught. The psychological impact on the Japanese population was immense. The government's propaganda about inevitable victory rang hollow against the nightly reality of fire raining from the sky. Complacency vanished, replaced by fear and a growing sense of hopelessness. Refugees fleeing the burning cities spread first-hand accounts, undermining official narratives. Worker absenteeism soared as people prioritized survival or simply lost the will to continue contributing to a seemingly lost cause. The phrase, routine air raid, became grimly common. Did the firebombing shorten the war? LeMay certainly believed his campaign could force surrender without a costly land invasion. Military planners estimated that continued conventional bombing, primarily incendiary raids, would destroy Japan entirely by the fall of 1945. While historians still debate the exact weight of the bombing campaign versus the Soviet entry into the war or the atomic bombs themselves, it's undeniable that the relentless destruction of Japanese cities played a significant role in the final decision to surrender. Emperor Hirohito himself cited the devastation and the suffering of his people. The terrible irony is that the horrific loss of life in Tokyo and other cities may have ultimately prevented the even greater slaughter predicted for the Allied invasion of the home islands, Operation Downfall, where casualties were expected to run into the millions on both sides. It's a difficult truth to grapple with. Curtis LeMay himself acknowledged the grim nature of his orders, famously stating that he supposed if he had lost the war, he would have been tried as a war criminal. Victory, it seems, provided its own justification in the context of total war. But for the American aircrews who flew those missions, the memories lingered. Seeing the vast inferno below, knowing the human cost, left an indelible mark on many, even decades later. War asks ordinary people to do extraordinary, sometimes terrible things, in the name of duty and strategy. The firebombing of Tokyo stands as a stark reminder of modern warfare's destructive potential, where civilian populations become tragically entangled in strategic calculations. It highlights the devastating efficiency of industrial warfare and the terrifying power unleashed when technology is bent solely toward destruction. While the mushroom clouds over Hiroshima and Nagasaki became the defining images of the war's end, the firestorm that consumed Tokyo on March 10, 1945, remains arguably the single most destructive air raid in human history. It was a night of unimaginable horror, born from strategic necessity and the terrible logic of total war. Understanding this event isn't just about remembering the past, it's about comprehending the forces that shaped our world and the profound human cost of conflict. We cover moments like these frequently. If you'd like to ensure you don't miss future explorations into critical historical events, subscribing is the easiest way to stay informed. Learning about events like the Tokyo firebombing helps us understand not only World War II but also the complex legacy of air power and the difficult moral questions that arise in wartime. We appreciate you taking the time to explore this history with us. You can find more videos about pivotal moments from the Second World War right here on our channel. Thanks for watching.